I'm not feeling my best right now about where we are on Kamala Harris in a place like Michigan right now. We have her underwater in our polling.
You know, I think Kamala's internals are saying the same thing, and that's why she's been trying to get Trump to debate her a second time. And I think that's why she's currently down at the border, or has been down at the border. If you noticed, her and Tim Walz have tried very hard to stay away from unfriendly interviews. They were really hiding from the media for a long period of time. So if they did not think they needed to debate another time, Kamala Harris wouldn't be asking for it, right? Her internal polls are very likely different from the polls that we're seeing. And to me, it's kind of confusing because, I mean, Trump's been making gains in almost every category, I think. Maybe except white people overall, but I'll kind of break that down in a second. But watch this video here. I found this interesting as well. So check this out.
National political correspondent Steve Kornacki to take us through the new NBC News Telemundo CNBC poll of Latino voters. Steve, break down these numbers for us.
Yeah, Kristen, some interesting stuff here. Again, we see every 4 years the Latino vote becomes a bigger and bigger share of the overall electorate. Well, among Latinos, our poll shows Kamala Harris leading Donald Trump 54 to 40%. Now, for some context, this is a little bit better for Democrats than they were doing among Hispanics when Joe Biden was their candidate. But I think the bigger story here is historically, 54 to 40 now is a 14-point advantage for the Democrats. Take a look back at the last three presidential elections, and these were the results in the exit polls among Hispanic voters. That 14, look at that cut there, almost 20 points less than just 4 years ago.
I mean, that's massive. Look at that. From 2012 to 2016, it goes down by, what is that, 6? From 2016 to 2020, it goes down by 5. Okay. Now from 2020 to 2024, it's down 19 points. That's almost 20 points. That is disastrous for Kamala Harris.
And 4 years ago, we were saying Donald Trump had made inroads with Hispanic voters. This suggests that has continued apace. So what is driving this shift? Well, we see a few big gaps here. A gender gap. Familiar with this one, certainly. Men tied when it comes to this race. Women, a 26-point advantage. Again, among Hispanic voters here, there's a gender gap, as we see with polls of overall voters. Also, age, a big factor here. Look at this. Voters over 50, Hispanic voters over 50, almost a 60-point advantage for Harris, and she's barely leading with Hispanic voters under 50. In fact, among men under 50, Donald Trump actually leads in our poll by 9 points, 9-point advantage there. Men under 50 for Trump. We also see an education divide. Again, we talk about this a lot when we're talking about the overall pool of voters, too. Men without 4-year degrees, that's now a double-digit Trump constituency in our poll. Men with degrees siding with Harris here, bigger margins among women, but we are seeing a bit of that education gap, and we are seeing a religion gap here. Among Catholic Hispanics, 20 points for Harris. Protestant Hispanics, 26 points for Donald Trump. Talking a little bit about the issues, what's the most important issue? We asked in this poll, abortion clocking in there. And Kamala Harris, big advantage. We see that being competent and effective. Kamala Harris leading there as well. But then the biggies. These are the ones that Hispanic voters are saying are the most important to them. Economy, small advantage, Trump. Inflation, 9-point advantage. And how about that? On the border and on immigration, Donald Trump with a double-digit advantage. 13 points in our poll when asked who would be better on this issue. Hispanic voters are saying it's Donald Trump. And that is part of a broader shift here on basic attitudes among Hispanic voters toward immigration. Look, when Donald Trump first ran in 2016, 69% of Hispanics said immigration helps the country more than it hurts. That's come down to 62, and the number who say it hurts more than it helps all the way up to 35%. Wow. There's something bigger and broader going on here, and I think you can see it finally with this. We ask a basic question of Hispanic voters, which party do you more identify with? 37% now say Republicans, 49% say Democrats, but again, look at how this has shifted in just the last dozen years. In 2012, this was a 41-point advantage for the Democrats. It has come all the way down to 12 points, Kristen.
But not even that. Look at from 2020 until now, right? In 2020, what is that? 54 minus 23. I can't even do math right now. 31. Yeah. 31. It came down from a 31-point lead to a 12-point lead. Again, devastating. Devastating.
A 29-point drop in terms of that gap there on which party Hispanics identify with in just 12 years.
The historical data really tells.
I mean, absolutely wild. Absolutely crazy. So now, okay, keep that in mind and then look at this as well.
Big part of the Democratic coalition. This is the Democrat versus Trump margin. Look, Kamala Harris is up by 66 points among black voters. That is up from where Joe Biden was earlier this year, right? When he got out of the race at 51, he was up by 51 points over Donald Trump. But this 66-point lead is way lower than that 80-point lead that Joe Biden had over Donald Trump at this point in the 2020 cycle. It's 14 points lower. So the bottom line is, yes, Joe Biden was really struggling with black voters. Harris has climbed up a little bit, but she's not anywhere near the level that Joe Biden was at this point just 4 years ago.
So yeah, again, these numbers matter. These numbers matter.
And what about Hispanic voters?
All right, so this is the same trend idea, right? All right, what you see here again, Democrat versus Donald Trump. Yes, Kamala Harris is ahead by 15 points. That's certainly significantly better than Joe Biden was doing just a few months ago when it was a 7-point advantage. But again, look at this. This 15-point advantage that Harris has is significantly less than Joe Biden was doing at this point 4 years ago. It's only about half that number. My goodness gracious, right? So again, we're seeing that double-digit shift from where we were 4 years ago at this point, not just among black voters, but Hispanic voters as well. Kamala Harris doing better than Joe Biden was doing earlier on this year, but not anywhere near as well as he was doing 4 years ago at this point.
Think about that. Virtually cut in half amongst Hispanic supporters, right? Like I said, significant drop amongst black voters, significant drop amongst Hispanic voters.
And then compare this to where Trump and Harris are with white voters.
All right, so we have all of this news here, which is really not very good for Kamala Harris, given where Joe Biden was 4 years ago at this point. And you're wondering yourself, how the heck is Kamala Harris so competitive in this race? And this is where it gets really interesting. This really racial dynamic, racial polarization decreasing, because look among white voters. All right, so what do we see here? This should actually be 2020. There we go. And what do we see? We see here again the Democrat versus Trump margin. And what do we see here? Look at this. Trump is ahead, but by 8 points. That is significantly lower than Trump's lead was at the end of the 2020 campaign when it was a 14-point advantage. And it's even lower than it was at this point back in 2020 when it was a 9-point advantage for Donald Trump. So what's essentially going on here is that Kamala Harris is able to make up the sort of lower standing that she has among black and Hispanic voters by doing significantly better than Joe Biden did 4 years ago in the final tally among white voters.
Which is kind of hard for me to believe for a couple of reasons. But for one, what I don't like about this is if you look, I think that November 20 is them comparing after the election. And then after the election, clearly the polls were off, right? So this September 20th had the polls being off. So I think a more fair comparison is to do September 20th then to September in 2020 compared to September of this year. And there's really only a 1-point difference, right? What I'm saying is in November of 2020, right, after the election was over, we got the results for the real polls. So we actually knew the numbers. In the polls that we have now, we don't know the numbers because the election hasn't happened yet. So, the more I think about it, I think there's a chance this election is not going to be near as close as people think it's going to be. But we still got to get out and vote. Do not take that for granted. Get out and vote. We definitely need to make this happen. They do not need, when I say they, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz do not need to be in the White House. So, they really do seem to be having a problem right now. And this isn't even including the new Atlas Intel, the swing state polls. Look, Trump is up 4 in their poll in Michigan. It is an outlier, but these were actually some of the most accurate, if not the most accurate people in the 2020 election. Pennsylvania, he's up 3. Wisconsin, he's up 2. Arizona, he's up 1. Georgia, he's up 1. Nevada, Harris is up. And North Carolina, Harris is up. If that plays out, Trump wins the election. If it plays out like that, Trump wins the election. And I have a very hard time believing that Trump takes Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and loses North Carolina. Is it possible? Sure. But I have a really hard time believing that. So I think the Harris campaign is feeling a little bit of pressure. I think many Democrats are nervous, as they should be. as they definitely should be. But that's all I got for tonight. I'll see y'all in the next one. Y'all have a good night. Stay safe. Like, share, and subscribe. Peace.